Hey everybody, guess where I am right now? As you can see from the flags in the background. Check it out, it's that terrible flag of Nepal. I am at the UN headquarters, which means I'm at fabulous New York City. And what we're gonna do while I'm here is I'm gonna talk to you about a few interesting East Coast / New Yorker things that are weird and interesting to me as someone from the West Coast. So the first thing is this thing, which is a New York butter roll. It is like a bun, but on the inside, it is sort of slathered with butter. And this is apparently a very common snack thing that the New Yorker set just sort of eats when they're going to work in the morning. The New York Times recently wrote a big feature about these things, and it was the source of some controversy because some people, mostly New Yorkers, were like, what the hell is this? Everyone has these things. But no, everyone does not have these things. The point of these buns is that because the New Yorkers live such a go-go lifestyle, they cannot have a proper breakfast, so they just buy one of these cheap buns for $1 at the food vending trucks on the side of the road, and then they scarf this down while they're on the subway or whatever. Yep, it is certainly a piece of bread with butter on it. And speaking of butter, the next thing we're going to look at is the way that butter is sold in the East, because they sell butter in a different way in the Eastern United States than they do in the Western United States, or for that matter, Eastern Canada and Western Canada. First, I need to find some butter. It's weird that this city doesn't seem to have any grocery stores. Ah, here we go. Drugstore butter. Apparently this type of butter has been New York's choice for generations. While they may sell it in a big box, you can see that it is actually packaged in these slim little sticks, which is distinct from the single gigantic block of slime that we all know and love in the West. I know it's a cliche, but my God, do people honk their horns a lot in this city? Now, here is another fun stereotypical thing. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these before. These "We are happy to serve you" cups. And then on the back it says, "Thank you and have a nice day." This is supposedly the most stereotypical way for New Yorkers to buy their coffee. They sell these as tourist items. They're so popular. You can buy like mugs and ceramic cups and keychains and stuff with this on it. Although I will admit that I actually had to search quite a bit to find a place that actually sold the coffee in these things. A lot of places these days are now just selling it in much less sort of distinctive cups, you know, just sort of standard paper cups, often ones that are not marked at all. Of course, since I do not actually drink coffee myself, we are just going to... No one's the wiser. Okay, and check this out. This is another good East Coast versus West Coast thing. I'm standing in front of the New York Public Radio building, and as you can see, the New York radio stations are all begin with the letter W, WNYC, and WQXR, and that's because in the East Coast, all of the radio stations begin with W, versus in the West Coast, where they all begin with K. In Canada, meanwhile, all of the radio stations begin with the call letter C. And now, lastly, let's talk about some of the differences in brand names from the East Coast to the West Coast. So you can see out here they sell this kind of mayonnaise under the brand name Hellmann's instead of Best Foods like they do in the West. And they call this kind of ice cream Eddie's instead of Dryers. Well, that's enough New York for a while. Back to Vancouver. Hey guys, so actually I'm in a kind of weird situation right now. At some point during my attempted trip back to Vancouver, I lost my passport, probably at one of the 3 airports in which I was making stopovers. So right now, I am in fabulous Minneapolis, what is the state? Minneapolis, Minnesota, hanging out in the shadow of the fabulous Mall of America. So until I can figure out how I'm going to get home without a passport, how I am going to cross an international boundary without a passport, I am stuck here to begin a fabulous new life in the Minneapolis Best Western. So stay tuned. So I have spent much of the last, I don't know, 12 hours, maybe last 24 hours, constantly on the phone, constantly talking to people, talking to airports, talking to police. I'm not gonna lie, this is a very stressful situation. It is very difficult because it is very unclear what you're supposed to do in a situation like this. You cannot get on an international flight unless you have a passport, but the process to get a new passport or even an emergency passport seems like it is very, very slow. They say it could take a few days, and knowing the government, that's probably more like it would take at least a week, maybe more than a week. But you know, at the same time, you can't just kind of hang out in a place. It costs a lot of money to stay in hotels. You know, last hotel I just stayed at last night was $200 for the night. I guess I can start scraping up Airbnbs and somewhat cheaper alternatives, but it is still extremely expensive to be stranded in a place. Okay, so I talked for a long time with the Canadian consular official in the Minneapolis, God, I have a hard time saying that city's name, Minneapolis Canadian Consulate, and they told me that my best hope is to just go to Seattle and try to wing it across the border without a passport, because apparently this is what most Canadians do when they are in situations like the one I'm in. Apparently, Canadian border officials have a hard time denying entry to Canada to Canadian citizens who can credibly prove that they are Canadian citizens, which I like to think is something that I could do pretty easily. I do have my driver's license, and I know a lot about Canada. Well, I was able to book a flight from Minneapolis to Seattle. Well, technically from Minneapolis to Dallas and then through there to Seattle. So let's see that this goes well.
Alaska Flight 39 is paging the phone.
Well, I made it to Seattle. Look at how flat and terrible my hair is because I've been away from my hair products for so very long. In a couple of hours, I'm going to get on the bus and attempt to cross the border that way, finagle my way across an international boundary without a passport, so wish me luck. Well, it took several days, but it worked. I was able to do what the consulate people suggested and get my way through the border simply by, basically just by telling them the story of what actually happened and having clear documentation to support. And now I am back in Vancouver. Gonna get the bus back to the house. Long adventure is finally over.